Excuse me, Your Worship, you should be live.
Thank you very much, Chris. All right, Council, it's 5 p.m. and time to get down to work. I will call the Council meeting of Monday, February 28, 2022 to order. And we've adopted the agenda. So we will move then into the land acknowledgement. And I would ask the Deputy Mayor, if you would please read that for us today.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabek, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationship it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous peoples within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. It's great to have you back at the Council table. Next item on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes, and the resolution reads as follows: that the minutes of the special meeting of Council held February 10, 2022, and the regular meeting of Council held February 22nd, 2022 be approved as presented. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Berman and Councillor Jeffrey. Are there any errors or omissions, Council? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. As I did in camera, it's just an acknowledgement that I wasn't present for any of these, but I've had a chance to review the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Is there any business arising from the previous minutes, Council? Seeing none, we'll get into community announcements, and I will start off with the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I have
just a second. Councillor Doherty is. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. As we have previously adopted the agenda for today, I was wondering if I could put forward a motion to modify the agenda to add a notice of motion in regard to the raising of the flag for Ukraine.
I will allow you to bring that motion forward. Well, first we'll finish our community announcements, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I have nothing this evening other than to simply state that it's good to be back. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLeod.
Nothing from me. Thank you.
Councillor Madigan.
Nothing for me other than to congratulate my good friend Ivy Martin and the rest of the people that received their Order of Collingwood yesterday at the Mayor's Levy. Sorry if I took anything away from you, Mayor Saunderson, but Ivy and I have known her for a long time, and I just wanted to send a personal congratulations again.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. And this is just to remind the public that Tuesday is International Women's Day, and the town will be raising a flag in recognition thereof on Friday. There are events being presented by Theatre Collingwood on Sunday evening and again on Monday evening, and the town will be presenting some online presentations on Tuesday as well. And for anyone who's interested, they can get additional information from the town website.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. We're looking forward to that event. Councillor Berman.
Oh, nothing for me today, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. I would just like to say how much I enjoyed your levy yesterday, and finally being able to speak in front of real persons. It was a terrific day. So thank you for that, and congratulations to all the winners. I just wanted to ask, will you be covering PMI Will this evening?
PM, I will, sorry.
The International Development Program for Collingwood's participation?
You know what? I saw the announcement that just went out, and I think it would be better if you provided it, Councillor Jeffrey, as our spokesperson on FCM.
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, it was very exciting. The council supported an application to be made for an in-kind contribution to FCM's international development, and we were appointed as a partner in PMI Will Ghana, and so I think this is, well, it is an honor, and I'm immensely proud that our staff have been willing to participate going forward, providing their expertise and embracing the learning, reciprocal learning that goes with these programs. So I'm really proud of everybody, and thank Council for supporting that. And it's a 6-year multi-country contract with Global Affairs Canada, but Collingwood will be working with Halton Region in Ghana. So really exciting news. And I would add to that, Mayor Saunderson, how over the moon, I think we all are at Home Horizon and Barbara Whitehouse with the results of the coldest night or coldest day of the year, coldest night of the year, sorry, that happened on Saturday. So congratulations. And I know it's not just a Collingwood thing, it's more of a Georgian Triangle contribution to our homeless and vulnerable youth within the Georgian Triangle. So I just want to say a shout out to all the organizers and to all the people who contributed and the sponsors, because that was just an overwhelmingly successful event. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey, and thank you for leading our team on the coldest night of the year walk. My understanding is they smashed their goals. They raised over $200,000 so for this very important initiative. So congratulations all around to everybody involved. And it's another testament just to the impact of volunteerism in our community. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I spent the whole time trying to get back in. Here I am. I have no announcements, though. Thank you. Thank you,
Councillor Hamlin. I have a couple of announcements tonight. First off, picking up on the comments of Councillor Madigan and Councillor Jeffrey. It was wonderful to be able to meet in person yesterday. We didn't have to worry about whether we were muted or whether people could see us or hear us. We were live and in person. To celebrate the mayor's levy belatedly, and to award the Order of Collingwood and the companion to the Order of Collingwood to some very, very incredible volunteers in our community. Tim and Sue Cook, Christine McFarlane, Margaret Mui, and Ivy Martin all received the Order of Collingwood, and Norman Wingrove received the companion to the Order of Collingwood. They were all shining examples of the power of volunteerism and how it can impact and change a community. And while we're congratulating these recipients, I'd like to congratulate all those that were nominated. It was an extremely difficult decision this year for the committee, and to congratulate all of our volunteers in our community for their daily work. They all deserve recognition, and they truly change our community, and they make us shine. So they've been doing an incredible job throughout the last 2 years and the challenges that we've been under. So thank you to all volunteers in our community for the incredible service you do. I'd also like to say that on Saturday, I had the great pleasure of bringing greetings on behalf of council to the 24-hour at Blue Relay that started at 12 noon on Saturday and went through to 12 noon on Sunday. And all funds raised go to our Special Olympics and to the Collingwood General Marine Hospital. So two very important initiatives in our community that are very much part of our fabric. And when I was there, it was a special anniversary for the Special Olympics, because in 1997, Collingwood hosted the Special Olympics World Winter Games. It was only the second time that they've been held outside of the United States. And since that time, the programs that have come from that, in 2008, Collingwood hosted the Ontario Paralympic Games. In 2012, we hosted the Ontario Winter Games. And our Special Olympics program has just taken off in the time since these games in 1997. And we were presented, the town of Collingwood was presented with this beautiful citation from our Special Olympics organizers in recognition of the importance of that event and of our relationship with the Special Olympics. As many of you know, half the proceeds from the Mayor's Golf Tournament go to support our local Special Olympians, and it's just incredible to watch them. And next Sunday, I will be out for a ski with them to see if I can keep up with them. So those are my announcements, and that then brings us I'll go back to you, Councillor Doherty, for your motion relative to the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And at the appropriate time, I would like to put forward a notice of motion to support Ukraine in the raising of their flag in this community. I will read that at the appropriate time.
Right. I'm going to look to Clerk Almus because we, under our new format, we approved the agenda at 2 p.m. My understanding is it may require a motion to amend the agenda. So I'll look to Clerk Almus. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you, Your Worship. That is correct. So if there is a motion, there'll be a requirement for a motion of reconsideration for the adoption of the agenda. And if council consents by 2/3 majority vote to support that, then a motion would be in order to add the item under other business consideration of raising the Ukrainian flag.
All right, Councillor Doherty, would you like to put a motion to reconsider the agenda?
So moved, Your Worship.
And do you have a seconder? All right, got many seconders. Deputy Mayor. So I think on a motion for reconsideration, there's no discussion and we need 2/3 majority to carry this. So I will call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. So then we will amend the agenda under other business to include the notice of motion.
Thank you.
Sorry,
go ahead, Clerk Almus, go ahead.
We'll just need one additional motion for that.
To add okay, so then Councillor Doherty, you'll need to move to amend the agenda to add your notice of motion under other business.
Thank you, Your Worship. So moved.
All right, now I'll look for a second. I'll look for a seconder, Councillor McLeod, and I'll call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. So don't let me forget, because there's a blank spot under other business right now. So that brings us then to item 8, interim control bylaw updates, item 8.1, and I will pass it over to CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have some items coming up today, so I'll just do a quick review of the changes in this update. Next slide, please. As most people are aware, Council provided direction to staff through this resolution summarized here that each week until the interim control bylaw is lifted, that Council and the community would get updates on water supply agreements, the design of the water treatment plant, exemptions and the like, and this deck includes those items. Next slide. The situation hasn't changed, except I hope that we're getting much closer to a resolution. The current water supply is safe and available. What we're looking at is that we have enough supply to grow as a complete community until the capacity of the plant is expanded at the end of 2025 or early 2026. Council's been very proactive and very transparent with everyone. And an interim control bylaw was used to temporarily and transparently pause development. So the people of Collingwood have what they need. And in 2021, our ready to go development applications were reviewed with this new lens to make sure they did represent growing as a complete community. And those applications as submitted, the ones that were ready to go, did receive exemptions. And if you want to do a residential renovation or an addition, or for that matter, a change of business space, please talk to the town staff at the building or planning departments, and many of these can proceed. Contact us to discuss. We also have an engaged site with a lot of information. Next slide, please. The water capacity update, next slide. The biggest thing that's been happening recently on this slide would be that we're in discussions with the new Tecumseh senior staff around the water agreement. So that's continuing this week. There are a couple of sessions with new Tecumseh, so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to bring things forward to our councils in the short term. Next slide, please. The water treatment plant expansion is on track. There are no changes on this slide. The existing dates are still accurate. Next slide, please. The remaining water supply, this chart needs to be updated. On February 22nd, last week, Council approved 6 additional exemptions. They were for a small amount of water, just over 1.3 single development units worth. But with a couple of vacations, we weren't able to update the chart. So there's the remaining allocation will be reduced from the 493 in the middle of the chart to just under 2, just over 1.3 SDUs less remaining in the allocation. So we should have that updated next week. We didn't want to hurry through any of these documentation of exactly what council's endorsed. Next slide, please. The exemptions that have been granted, we would encourage those who have exemptions to use those and go forward for their approvals or building permits as soon as practical. And if you don't have an exemption, it doesn't mean that your project can't proceed. We can bring it all the way forward up to, but not including council planning decisions. And you'll see shortly that hopefully we have some dates to be able to move forward with those pending a couple of items I'll mention. Next slide. With respect to the land use planning study then, next slide. No changes to the schedule. We are still on schedule to finish per our projected times. No changes except we moved the little green arrow over 1 more week to the right. Next slide, please. So the 2022 consultation and decision timing targets, pending any unknowns, there are 2 decisions being sought from council today that will be presented separately in their own agenda items. One is to confirm formally that the land use planning policy study is complete. And the second is a council decision on a zoning bylaw amendment. We also have lined up for Strategic Initiatives Committee on March 7th, the final interim control bylaw exemptions report, assuming the interim control bylaw can be lifted in April. The subsequent week, we have at Development and Operations Committee, the proposed servicing capacity allocation policy, and that includes the outcome of the 2nd round of consultations. So we're very excited to bring that forward. We think it's a good document for our community, but we'll see how council reacts when that's posted, and looking forward to your input and decision. In early March, we'll have the zoning bylaw amendment notice of decision. And in late March, we're anticipating the last day for the zoning bylaw amendment appeals. And if it is not appealed, we'll be able to go forward and start allocating water under the new approach and keep our complete community moving. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go over these last 2 slides in any detail. They do need that same just over 1.3 single development unit update that was needed in the overall slide. So that would confirm the update for this week. Back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CAO. Council, are there any questions or comments on the presentation today? Seeing none, then we will move on to item 9, which is the Standing Committee Report for the Development and Operations Services Committee meeting of February 14, 2022. And item 9.1.1, the resolution reads that Council received the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee Report from its meeting held February 14, 2022, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. C 2022-5 Development and Operations Services Board and Advisory Committee Annual Report, and the recommendation is to receive the report. PW 2022-8 Master Stormwater Management Model Report, and the recommendation is to receive the report for information. And P 2022-2 Radio Communications Tower Proposal 879 6th Street, file number D112020. And the recommendation is to approve a concurrence for the radio communications tower proposed at 879 6th Street to be provided to Industry, Science and Economic Development Canada. These items all passed unanimously, so they're coming before you in the grouped item. And it will be moved by Chair Hamlin and seconded by Vice Chair Vice Chair Jeffrey. We had that up for re-election, so we will be dealing with that, but that's last year's chair and vice chair. So these items passed unanimously and they're bundled together. If somebody wants to pull one of those items for a change in direction, now is your opportunity. Otherwise, we'll vote on it. And if you want to pull an item to speak to it, you can do that once we voted. So is there anyone who would like to change a direction in any of the items? Seeing none, then I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Would anyone like to pull an item to comment? All right. Then we will move to the second item, 9.1.2. This item was also before the Development and Operations Standing Committee, but it was not a unanimous vote. So it's to be voted on separately. And the resolution reads that staff report PW 2022-9 Boulevard Parking and Beautification Update be received, and that council support option 3 contained herein, and that staff bring forward for council's consideration the necessary amendments to the existing bylaws, including parking and road occupancy bylaws, to include the recommended changes as outlined in option 3. And that will be moved as well by Chair Hamlin and Vice Chair Jeffrey. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I was wondering if it would be possible for someone from Public Works just to give a very high level of what option 3 actually is for public understanding.
Okay, thank you for that. And Director Slama has come up on the screen, so I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Worship. Good evening. Yeah, so a high-level review of option 3 would be working gradually from our state today to a vision, a longer-term vision that would have parking on boulevards, have greater restrictions. If you were to alter the boulevard or you needed to use that space for parking, there would be a requirement to receive a permit from the municipality. And there might be other conditions attached to that. And to work towards this future vision, which can also include the potential of beautification elements, such as trees or shrubbery and things like that. So we've proposed that both bylaw need to make some changes to the parking bylaw, and then we also need to make some adjustments to the road occupancy bylaw. The parking bylaw, of course, would give more restrictions and directions on where you can park and where you can't park. The road occupancy bylaw would speak to the process of receiving a permit to allow for an alteration or to allow for parking. So for option 3, the proposal would be that staff would work towards amendments to those 2 bylaws in 2022. And then we would develop the new processes as recommended by the amendments in the bylaws, whatever those might be in the end, and implement those new processes and any new systems. And what we would see is a gradual transition over time, where in the areas of town where we have an urban street section where we have a curbed street, then where it's easier, we have a greater ability to place those restrictions. But for some of the older streets that don't have a curb, then we would look to be implementing the greater restrictions as those streets are being reconstructed. So once those become, have a cross section with a curb and a sidewalk and a more defined boulevard, then those restrictions would be implemented then. So there is potentially, a long transition time. It all depends on how we go through those road reconstruction projects.
Thank you, Director Slama. Anything further, Council?
Mayor Saunderson, if I just follow up on that, just to confirm that there will be opportunities going forward for more public input as those amendments come forward to council. And okay, I just wanted to have that clarified. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And yes, those would come back through the Development and Operations Committee. So yes, there'll be opportunity for public comment.
Yes.
I had Councillor Doherty, then Councillor McLeod, and then Councillor Madigan. Go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. And through you to Director Slama. I'm so sorry. My biggest concern with this staff report when it came forward to DNO was the fact that the uncurbed, non-curbed streets in our town would not be subject to these changes in the bylaw. And these comprise the majority of our streets at the present time. And my understanding was the whole process of urbanizing all of our streets is a process that could take 20 to 30 years. And in the meantime, we have boulevards in some parts of town that are not functioning as they should and are taking away from the pride of ownership of the homes that are in front of them. And so I'm wondering, why is it that it is necessary to wait until our roads are urbanized in order to implement these updated bylaws?
Director Slama.
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Doherty. Well, one consideration is that, moving to an option such as option 2, which would be banning the boulevard parking, like a town-wide prohibition. That's quite a big change for the residents of our community, and we're very aware that in some of these areas that you mentioned, there is limited places to park, and specifically in some areas, the driveway area is short. So I think that the approach that staff has brought forward is one that helps transition the town towards a vision. I think there might be opportunities to move at a faster pace, but I think option 3 allows us to introduce a change and develop some processes and enact some change in action, and hopefully change some behaviors moving forward. And then, we can look at the opportunities to, in the other areas, if we find that this, the time is too long. But it would be quite a bit of work for bylaw and to enforce some of these a town-wide prohibition of boulevard parking, and that is a major concern, right? So there is the concern of having a bylaw that says that doesn't allow something, but yet we don't have the ability to enforce it. So it's trying to find a balance between the resources that we have and the opportunity that we feel is reasonable to introduce to our residents to try and encourage that change in behavior.
Follow up, Councillor.
Yes, please. So is there an opportunity for us to perhaps embark on a public communications or public education campaign whereby we introduce the reasons why boulevards exist, that they are there for road safety, that they do assist in stormwater absorption, that they do assist in beautifying our town, and perhaps to make people aware of those functions and maybe to think twice before parking on a boulevard where they have other options to park.
I see Director Slamanani. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Through you to Councillor Doherty. I think there is an opportunity to look at such a campaign. It just would require some discussion with our communications manager and, determining how we can fit that in with some of our other duties. But I think it's a reasonable request.
Thank you. And just one other item, if I may. Just jump right out of my head. Go ahead and I'll come back.
I'll come back to you, Councillor. I'll come back to you. Councillor McLeod, you're next, and then I have Councillor Madigan. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. I read this report with interest, but I'm curious to know, and I don't think we need to relitigate what happened at the Development and Operations Committee, but I'm just wondering if we could, if I could find out the genesis of this motion. Like, what problem is this staff report looking to solve? Are we inundated with cars being abandoned on our streets? Through you, Mayor.
Director Slama, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor McLeod. So I would say that we're not inundated with this problem, but the staff report and the recommendation does come from a couple of council resolutions that have been raised over the last couple of years. And the two major concerns are damage to the boulevard, which is affecting some of what was the word, Councillor Doherty, that you mentioned, like the purpose of the boulevard for some stormwater absorption. And the other reason is the element of damage to town property and that appearance and how that takes away from our boulevard cross section, right? And how we want our streets to look in the community. And I know CAO Skinner had her card up there, but I just thought I would pipe in first.
Thank you, Director. Go ahead, CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Chair. What I really wanted to say was the genesis of these. This report, in fact, was from council notices of motion. So probably the problem being solved could be we could ask the members who put forward those notices to speak to the problems that they saw within the community. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO. Does that suffice? Councillor McLeod, or would you like to hear from the individuals who brought motions relating to the boulevard?
No, I'm trying to cast my mind back to when this all came to pass. Thank you. That does help. I am of the opinion that that I'm likely going to move that we support option number 1. Insofar as I don't see this as a huge problem. But I am interested in option number 3 insofar as I would like to see no homeowner lose their parking spot, like, ever, if that's possible. And I don't even know, like, sometimes houses get handed down from child to father to son. And so I would certainly like to see some form of legacy titling or permitting for whatever happens. I think that it's, I don't think we want it. So many of us have lost so much in the last 2 years. I don't think we need to take anything else away from anybody, including a parking spot. And so that's where I stand on that. But I'm open to being convinced on number 3, but I sort of feel like it's a solution looking for a problem, quite honestly. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, I had your card up. Did it relate to the Councillor McLeod's comments?
It did, in the sense that I think I was maybe one of the persons that was looking to get some answers to questions that were being brought forward to me by residents specific to this matter. So I'm happy to comment further as to the genesis.
Certainly, go ahead.
I think that I certainly will be supporting number 3, and I'm pleased that it allows for some flexibility, and that it is a broad and long-term approach to an issue, as opposed to maybe coming down with a hammer or doing nothing at all. One of the things I think that the real genesis behind this, in fact, and it's not necessarily addressed, is that we do have properties, and this dovetails more into just a property standards issue, where homes or front lawns are being used as parking lots for multiple vehicles. And in some cases, some of those vehicles are actually left in a dormant position for an extended period of time, i.e. the entire winter. But I also think that it's a problem that's been sort of downloaded into the community and communities all across the province through provincial planning. And that is that we had policies that dictated the number of homes within a particular area, which meant that our frontages that, at one time used to be 75, 65, 50 are now down to, 30-foot lots. And in some cases in other municipalities like Toronto, 16 and 17-foot frontages. And it's put in an incredibly exorbitant amount of pressure on persons who are looking to park, because at the same time that the province was mandating increasing density, we as a population, from a consumer perspective, were broadening the use of what we were doing with our properties. And so, a generation prior to us maybe had a vehicle or 2 vehicles, where now there may be a vehicle or 2 vehicles or 3 vehicles out front, because the garage is being used for sea-doos, snowmobiles, small watercraft, all of the kids' hockey gear, skis, the laundry list goes on. And so what we've seen is proliferation of vehicles out onto the lawns, out onto our boulevards, and out onto our streets, because as a society, we've determined that it's better to have all of these toys and have them located on property as opposed to elsewhere. And I agree that it's not necessarily a significant issue town-wide, but it is definitely an issue if you were to take some time and visit some of our newer subdivisions, southwest corner of the community. That area in particular, I would suggest, is a prime example of what I'm talking about. But I also, to turn this into a positive and looking to the future, and to pick up on Councillor Doherty's comment in terms of really conveying the message from an environmental standpoint, I just, and heaven forbid I digress too much and take flack online, but I do want to just share for a moment the story of a gentleman from Los Angeles by the name of Ron Finley. Last name is Finley. An African-American who born and raised in a particular area of Los Angeles, and decided that he was going to grow a vegetable garden on his boulevard. And a neighbor complained, and under the ordinance, I guess under the city of Los Angeles, and it's a different governance system, but he was actually charged. So he wasn't given a ticket, he was actually charged. And he fought to change the system, and he fought to bring attention to the use of the boulevards and how we can better make use of these, for lack of a better term, underutilized areas for, instead of just parking or just grass, but really making it a part of the community and how we use it and how we interact as neighbors, et cetera. And it's if people are interested, the guy's last name is Finley, Finley, Ron Finley, and it's a really interesting story. And what it shows is it's a paradigm shift.
I hate to cut you off, but the clerk almost has raised her card, and I know we're operating under the new procedural bylaw time restraints. So Clerk Almus.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, just for clarification, each member is provided 5 minutes with an additional opportunity following everybody speaking for an additional 5 minutes in accordance with our new procedural bylaw. And
thank you. So Deputy Mayor, if you can wrap it up quickly, then you go ahead.
I'm finished.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much. I will be quite brief. I thank goodness that Councillor McLeod spoke before me, because I thought I was going to be the only one that was going to speak to this. I am more apt to go towards status quo. I think I do agree with our Deputy Mayor. Parking in our community has become a problem on the streets. I know when I was looking for a new home, I was lucky enough to find a street where nobody parks on, thank gosh. But that I don't think we're going to solve anything. I think we have 3 to 4 cars for all of these new houses, because some of them are used for rental properties. So I don't think this is going to solve any problems. I think it's just going to make more. And so I'm thank you, Councillor McLeod, for putting up your card before me. And I will be more likely to move for option 1. Although curbed versus uncurbed is a very interesting comment. I think implementing this over at this time just actually won't help people. It'll hurt them more. It's the small things that it's the straw that broke the camel's back, and I don't think this is a straw that I want to vote towards to put on. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? We've had a healthy discussion. I'm going to look to Clerk Almus. We've had some discussion about alternate options, but the option is on the floor. So we proceed with that vote first. And if that vote is defeated, then I will look to other council members to put other options on the floor. Councillor Doherty, you had your card up.
Yes, thank you. My last question to Director Slama, and that was just to clarify going forward, as boulevard parking would be permitted by permit, would anyone who had no other alternative be denied a permit to park on boulevard?
Director Slama.
Through your worship to Councillor Doherty. So at this time, we're looking to consider what some of the exceptions might be. And so again, we would bring this forward in the amendments to the road occupancy permit. And so council and the public would have an opportunity to see them there and speak to them there as well.
Thank you. And just one final, sorry, Your Worship.
Very quickly, go ahead, Councillor.
Yes, very quickly. Is there necessarily a cost to acquiring a permit? Is it mandatory that every permit that's issued in the town of Collingwood must have a cost attached to it? or could a permit be issued just as a matter of control, but not in any way to hurt the resident who is making application? That may have to go to Clerk Almus.
Well, I will start with Director Slama, and if necessary, we'll go to Clerk Almus, but I think all of this is probably grist for conversation when it comes back to council. But go ahead, Director Slama.
Yes, thank you, Worship. So through you to Councillor Doherty, I think it would be that it's a good question, and I would definitely lean on the clerk's department and also bylaw and even Manager Cole is here. He might be able to speak to. I think I just would need to understand if we've done that with other forms of permit, like non-monetary permits, and the success for that. So I just can't speak to that myself.
Okay.
Manager Cole or Clerk Almus, anything to add at this point? Okay, I think that's a topic for discussion, and we'll come back through development operations to council. All right, we've had good discussion. So the resolution is that, have I read this in already, Clerk Almus? I have, and we've got a mover and a seconder. Okay, so the motion's on the floor, and if this is defeated, then we'll go back and look for other options. But right now we're voting on supporting option 3. All in favor? And opposed? And that is carried. And that brings us then to staff reports. And 10.1 is the Affordable Housing Task Force recommendation review, the 3-month report back to council. We've had a lot of hands touching this report. CAO Skinner, Clerk Almus, Director Valentine, and Treasurer Quinlan. Who wants to lead off the charge on this presentation? Clerk Almus, go ahead.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. Firstly, I would like to thank my colleagues for the dedication in this report. This has taken a good solid, probably month and a half to really do some background research and put forward some strategic ideas in how we can advance affordable housing in the town of Collingwood based on recommendations that were very well put together from our task force and how we can move forward in a very kind of proactive, progressive, but meaningful difference, I guess. So I'll lead, and as the background, again, on November 15th, and that was following a presentation that the task force made to council on November 1st at our SIC meeting. The final report of the Affordable Housing Task Force was presented. The recommendations included 47 and they were based within their mandate areas, as well as additional other important criteria that they wanted council to also take into consideration that weren't directly related to their mandate. And the motion also included a request to look at establishing an Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. In 2022, the budget included the Affordable Housing Planning Specialist at $80,000 and the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund at $350,000. Our next slide talks to, and it was quite lengthy within our staff report, but we thought it was very prudent that council and the public were aware of actually the details of housing that are included in our existing plans and policies. So we do define the importance of housing and the criteria that are provided within our official plan and the work that's currently underway. Our community-based strategic plan, recognizing the weaknesses in the SWOT analysis that was provided, looking at a lack of supply of attainable affordable housing and increasing social polarization and gap between the rich and the poor was identified as one of those strong weaknesses. We also have in the Economic Development Action Plan the objective to attract the workforce we need, and together with that workforce that we need housing for those employees and their employers. The UN Sustainability Goal number 11, to make towns and cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And housing is a very important component of that. And the Development Charges Act in 1997, the section that talks about extended period of time for remittances of fees. Sorry, I'm tongue-tied today too. And we'll switch to the next slide. So our next slide moves to action now. So OP, as you're aware, the OP, the official plan, is currently under review, and it includes enhanced policies that encourage and support affordable housing. We have in place and underway the hiring of an affordable housing specialist, the review and update and the enhancement of existing accessory dwelling unit communication documents, and considering effective financial subsidy to incent construction, preparation of affordable housing master plan that we'll be reviewing this afternoon, reinstatement of the affordable housing task force with additional members, as we do have 2 vacancies, and depending on council's review of that recommendation, we would continue to solicit interest from the task force members in carrying on for a shorter term mandate. The town looking at hosting a UN UEF International World Summit regarding housing and the initiatives that have been put forward from our task force and the work that Collingwood will have undertaken before that housing summit happens later this year, in collaboration with local provincial governments and other organizations and stakeholders. So there's some significant work that is currently underway, and we're looking to include as we move forward. And we'll move to our next slide. And I'll let our CAO take this one away.
Thank you, Clerk Almus. I have to say that since we received the report from the Affordable Housing Task Force, it's been for me an almost daily brainstorming of how to answer this question on the slide. So how can the town of Collingwood most effectively contribute to addressing the housing crisis? You saw that Clerk Almus had already spoken. We have Director Valentine coming up, and Nathan from her team was also quite involved. And you'll see that our Treasurer Quinlan is also on the line today. Those, among others, have been meeting regularly to figure out how we can, as a municipality, drive forward. We also had the Affordable Housing Task Force council itself in driving this work to go forward, and community stakeholders like the Institute of South Georgian Bay and their CMHC related subgroup that we owe some deep thinking thanks to. There's some very difficult concepts and transformations that come forward when you really start thinking about housing, and I'm going to talk about some that are very high level. Within Canada, at the federal level, we have monetary policy, what you can buy with your funds, what your funds are worth, and looking at homes as a store of value versus a place to live, an investment tool. And many of the recommendations that we're hearing on how to deal with this nationally, internationally, even within Ontario, is trying to drive housing away from a store of value and into somewhere to live. And if you look at the data for Collingwood, we definitely need more 2 to 3 bedroom units. We need those to be available on a rental basis as well as a purchase basis. We have big challenges, and you'll see as I talk through the next slide about housing for people who work here, and how in fact to target housing to people who work here without owning that housing, the town or potentially a nonprofit group owning that housing, and even then it can be challenging. So it's difficult, and I just wanted to talk through a couple of the things that we are looking at, what we can do here as a local municipality, and potentially one that we hope will be a leader, and that some of our projects will in fact be a UN Urban Economy Forum international leader in what a town of our size can actually do in a housing crisis. Next slide, please. So we do have a community-based strategic plan, and that plan is supported by other master plans that set out in more detail our town's vision for certain areas or certain scopes and the steps to get there. So it's proposed that the next document produced would be an affordable housing master plan. I know the Affordable Housing Task Force called it a strategic plan, but I think in the lingo of the town of Collingwood, it's an affordable housing master plan. And we think that's going to be important to have a roadmap that prioritizes what can be done to truly increase affordable housing. And that plan would include timelines, the resources and expertise needed for each of the recommendations that the Affordable Housing Task Force has come up with, the risks of proceeding in each recommendation, and the potential benefits so that council has the information to move forward. I do want to say Clerk Almus went through what we can do right now. So even though we're setting out that we think this master plan is very important for our community, we want council and the community to know that we've heard what the task force has said. We've heard what council has articulated with respect to how important this is, and there would be things happening immediately in addition to and in parallel to this master plan. We believe that to get the best plan possible, that we should develop it with the assistance of a consultant, and that there is ample work moving forward for a specialized staff person and the consultant. We've suggested that council put aside up to $75,000 of the reserve fund, and that our goal is to have the master plan ready within 6 months of a contract award to a specialist. Next slide, please. And I have 2 more slides I'll speak to. One is initial principles of the Affordable Housing Master Plan. What we've looked at and what we'd recommend to council is that these 4 items be part of the context. One is a focus on moderate income households. It's defined in the Affordable Housing Task Force's report that means the 40th to 60th income deciles. And there's some statistics in your report today that we've quoted from the task force and their consultant that says what those amounts are. We know this needs to be a collaboration with local and provincial governments, including the county, and private and public organizations. We certainly don't want to duplicate research going on elsewhere or investments going on elsewhere. We see that the town has ongoing initiatives to support lower income households, or in fact, those who are unhoused, things like the former out of the cold supports, and things like our work with people who are developing their own businesses. But we propose that they would be out of scope for the Affordable Housing Master Plan. And finally, that any developments that were recommended using substantial town contributions or led by the town would of course meet or exceed our urban design and other standards. We're looking to build a high quality of life and to build it once with people who are integrated with the community in beautiful settings close to parks, transit, and trails. Next slide, please. But there's much we don't know. And we think that there is beyond opportunity need for the council to weigh in today and potentially more appropriately as we bring forward the steps of the proposed master plan. Things like the role of a local municipality, whether the town itself, under the leadership of council, should develop land and own or operate housing. If financial incentives are provided to provide affordable housing, whether the town should be carrying out the monitoring of agreements and enforcement of that on the longer term, or if there are other alternatives. B is a very important one, which is the town's formal position with respect to more intense infill and intensification, which would balance the need for more supply and the need for affordable supply with additional building and higher building on existing areas of town. Council needs to work out whether the initial $350,000 generous contribution to the reserve fund is an annual investment, or if there's a range of investment amounts that might match the future master plan. Whether you want to add a future permanent affordable housing program to our set of town programs that were outlined in the programs and services review carried out in 2020 by Deloitte. And we think it's very important that we talk about how local employers, investors, and developers can be partners in housing for moderate income households. And you'll see as we move forward with the folks who, the groups we suggest beyond the Affordable Housing Advisory Group going forward, that it does include folks like local employers and developers. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over for some more of the technical feedback from Director Valentine.
Thank you, CEO Skinner, and I'll be taking the group through the balance of the presentation. So on this slide, you'll see that we have outlined 3 different forecasts with respect to housing growth anticipated for the town. And the reason we looked at this was to better understand the scope of the overall housing supply need. And while the various reports show differing totals, they're relatively consistent in their projections for permanent year-round dwellings, which is noted on the slide as occupied dwellings in the center of the chart. Where the projections do differ is the amount of seasonal growth expected in the town, with the development charges background report being the most aggressive, and that's the first column in our chart. And the town's growth management report does reduce the seasonal forecast to a certain extent. And then we have the County of Simcoe Municipal Comprehensive Review projections, which don't account for seasonal dwellings at all. So what we do take from these numbers is that to meet housing supply projections into the future, we'll need to be on track to construct between approximately 400 and 500 units per year. So moving on to the next slide, question is, can we do this? And from a historical perspective, especially the last few years, the number of housing units being built annually does appear to meet the projected needs for housing of our permanent residents, and to all of the seasonal demand, depending which forecast data set is used. While the town certainly welcomes and values seasonal residents, it is an additional challenge in planning for affordable housing, in that seasonal users will continue to desire to live in Collingwood, and they may also be attracted to affordable options. So town staff are not aware at this time of a legal mechanism to require affordable housing units to only be offered to those year-round residents or individuals working in the town, but remain open to ideas on that front. In addition to the short-term, there's also another short-term to mid-term challenge, which is the availability of water capacity to service the forecasted housing supply. And it is anticipated that we should have sufficient servicing capacity to build the number of residential units needed annually during this period where the water treatment plant expansion is underway between now and 2026. Final calculations are being worked on and are likely to be impacted by the quantity of industrial, commercial, or institutional growth that we may also see over this same time period. Moving on to the next slide. One of the other key questions that we looked at as a team is, what is the level of investment that should be applied, and in what form should that investment take to produce results that have the highest on-the-ground gains in affordable housing units? And many of the recommendations from the task force involve financial investment, and some of those are summarized on the slides. Staff have been assembling research and guidance from many organizations, and we've looked at, including but not limited to, Ontario's Housing Affordability Task Force report, the Association of Canadian Municipalities Blueprint for Action on Affordable Housing, as well as the Ontario Professional Planners Institute Top 10 Housing Supply and Affordability Recommendations, which also include a number of financial considerations. And the content of these reports that I just mentioned do align significantly with many of the recommendations of the task force, but they do diverge in other ways. There are additional actions that the town could also contemplate with respect to financial considerations that were not necessarily identified by the task force. And the staff are suggesting that the materials that we've collected through our research and others that may be available be used in the preparation of the Affordable Housing Master Plan to ensure that all ideas are on the table. Next slide, please. So now we're moving on to updates on the Affordable Task Force suggestions that were categorized in the report as other critical recommendations. And the first one on this slide, which was alluded to earlier in the presentation, is the hiring of a housing specialist, which was approved through the 2022 budget. And staff are set to proceed with the recruitment process should council endorse today's recommendation. The reason that today's recommendation is connected to the housing specialist is the job description as drafted is predicated on a significant portion of the position being used to assist with the development of an affordable housing master plan, and then subsequently developing projects and programs that would be needed for its implementation. Also on this slide, we see the recommendation for the establishment of an affordable housing advisory committee. At this point, staff are suggesting that it might be premature to set up a new advisory body until the completion of the master plan. The programs and projects that are ultimately selected as priorities for our municipality through the master plan will likely inform what type of advisory or governing body would be best positioned to assist the town with implementation and expertise. However, we are suggesting that the council consider extending the mandate and updating the terms of reference for our existing task force such that they remain in place until the completion of the master plan, but with some expanded representation to include other important voices, such as local employers, the development community, and those with lived experience. Moving on to the next slide. Another recommendation of the task force was to incorporate a municipal not-for-profit housing corporation, and staff are recommending that this be evaluated and prioritized in the context of the other recommendations made by the task force with the expertise of a housing consultant through the master plan, as there's quite a lot to consider in this recommendation, including legal ramifications. The second point on this slide does actually group together a number of recommendations made by the task force related to visions, definitions, goals, targets, all of which staff are suggesting would be wonderful additions to the Affordable Housing Master Plan. And they would, in some cases, also be appropriate to include in the update of the official plan if the timelines can be sufficiently aligned. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we've again grouped similar recommendations that are related to hosting of open forums for stakeholder conversations, increasing awareness and promotion of an innovative and non-traditional housing models. And we envision that the Affordable Housing Task Force, should council deem fit to continue on with their mandate, adjusted as recommended by staff, and as well any successor advisory body would be the right forum to lead these conversations and information exchanges with the support of the staff housing resource. On to the next slide, please. So we're now transitioning to a couple of recommendations that are related to land use planning and development. And the first was a request to redesignate certain specific town-owned lands to support apartment-style dwelling unit types and densities through the official plan review process. So we have broken down this request into two parts. So firstly, with respect to the redesignation through the official plan update, the consultant leading the project has indicated that a council resolution would be required to demonstrate intent and to ensure that the public was sufficiently advised of the changes. Otherwise, it could get lost in the larger update process of the official plan and not receive the site-specific review that would be needed. And further, should significant supporting documentation be required to justify this type of change in designation, it might not be appropriate to deal with these requests through a wider review process, and it might be more appropriate to look at a site-specific official plan amendment. So the second component is, go back one slide. Yep, almost done with this one. The second component to this request is more of a consideration or question ultimately to council, is looking at this request in the context of other affordable housing fiscal priorities and embarking on a conversation as to whether it would be most beneficial to develop the identified town-owned lands or to take another route. And one possible route would be to sell those lands and invest the funds resulting from that sale in other ways that may have greater impacts on affordable housing on the ground in our community, or perhaps use the proceeds from sale of those lands to buy more suitable lands that are already designated and zoned for the type of development which would support affordable housing. So a number of these property specific questions will likely need to be dealt with through an in-camera report to further explore these ideas. Now we can go on to the next slide. Thank you. So following along with the theme of the previous slide, this recommendation involves acquiring a property that's currently zoned and suitable for immediate development of affordable housing. This would represent a significant financial investment, and it could potentially be supported, as mentioned, by the sale of the lands referenced on the previous slide that may not be shovel ready. And again, these are large questions about whether to prioritize the development of newly acquired lands or the redevelopment of existing lands, such as the Birch Street apartments, or the development of existing town-owned lands. And staff do feel that there's a wide variety of expertise needed in having some of these conversations, and it would be helpful to include on the plate of a consultant who would be looking at the affordable housing master plan process. Next slide, please. So this slide does take us away from those other critical recommendations, but does provide important updates on other aspects of the Affordable Housing Task Force report. This slide also focuses on financial type recommendations, and it does note that the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund has been established and that an update to the town's development charges bylaw at this time is not necessary, given the Development Charges Act already permits the freezes and deferrals with respect to affordable housing. Regarding the last point, staff have received professional advice and a community benefits charge is recommended to be delayed at this time. Next slide, please. I think this one might be the last one on our recommendations, but important nonetheless. So we do have recommendations from the task force related to the official plan and zoning bylaw, and those have all been provided in their complete details to the consultant leading the official plan review, and staff are also tracking the other implementation suggestions for the zoning bylaw considerations as that update will follow the official plan review process. With a new affordable housing specialist resource on staff, there may be an ability to fast track some of the low hanging fruit type zoning recommendations instead of waiting for the wider review, which has been a question that we've heard a number of times around this council table. So hopefully an additional resource can assist with those types of options. But I would suggest that fast tracking is a relative term because the zoning changes that facilitate affordable housing may conflict with other community concerns that we hear frequently, including preserving neighborhood character, the desire to impose stricter height limitations and greater setbacks, traffic safety, the need for more parking, and compatibility with adjacent uses. So all that to say is these conversations can be difficult, but necessary if we want to make meaningful impact on affordability through a shift in balance between preserving the status quo and achieving those broader environmental and social goals. And that brings us to the very last recommendation. Oh, still the previous slide. The very last recommendation in this presentation, which was the preparation of a community improvement plan, as well as the waiving of planning and building fees. And we're suggesting again that these be prioritized against the other considerations for which would have the greatest short-term impacts on affordability in our community through the affordable housing master planning process. And now the last slide. Thank you so much. As I'd like just to echo Clerk Almus's comments at the beginning of the presentation that this report and presentation were comprehensive. And as you can see, the subject matter crosses several departments in the corporation. And there was certainly a large number of staff who put in many hardworking hours to contribute to this report. And all of us, in addition, Treasurer Quinlan as well, are here to answer any questions that council may have. Thank you so much.
You, Director Valentine, Clerk Almus, CEO Skinner, and Treasurer Quinlan, and to all staff that were involved in this very comprehensive report. This is a very critical and big issue and a complex issue. So with that, I will open the floor to council for questions or comments. Councillor Jeffrey, and then Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. So I agree with, in principle, what staff are proposing here. And I do want to say thank you very much, because it sounds like it has taken some time also for staff to get their feet under them in terms of what is required for this portfolio. And it is a lot of work and a lot of putting it together. So for me, really from a high level, the timing of the housing specialist, we put 80,000 in the budget, but they're not going to be hired until partway through the year. Is there a way of offsetting what comes out of the reserve fund by applying the funds that won't be spent on wages this year? And I think we need to be careful of the wording in our reports, and it's something we're still getting used to, but I would never prioritize fiscal or those priorities ahead of quality of life for people in our community. So I understand the challenges, but if it were worded in a way that said that we could do more quality work by selling some of the assets, that would be a better wording for me. I really think that the meat of this work is going to have to be done per the recommendation going forward. But I also want to make sure that the housing specialist isn't going to be used for the other many pressures and priorities that the planning department has, and that they will not get distracted from there. And I think that the job description that was included has given them enough that they will not be taken away from this portfolio for other priorities within the planning department. And I think we're a lot better off. City of Hamilton, I heard from them today, and some advocacy work we're doing. They have no land. They're looking at trying to repurpose some things, so they don't even have those benefits. And then I was wondering where the MZO conversation goes into in terms of the use. We haven't had that education yet, or that report come back. Does that fit into the conversation, whether it's a tool the town would use in the concept of an affordable housing master plan? And really to point out that it's not the number of units, just the number of units you bring on board, but it's the type of housing you bring on board, because it won't do us any good if we keep bringing on 6-bedroom houses, you know. So I think that's it for me. I don't know if it fits into this conversation of affordable housing, but I've brought it to council twice before. But I know that in British Columbia, they have a deferral of taxes program for seniors and for young families or any families that are challenged. And if they own property, obviously it can attach the property for collection at some point. But by application, they do have the opportunity to defer their taxes to help them with their day-to-day. So those are kind of the points I have. And I really look forward to the conversations that are going to come going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey, for those comments. I know staff has got those comments down. I think what I'll do at this point, though, is get the resolution on the floor, and then we can discuss the resolution. So, and the resolution reads, it's staff report CAO 2022-3 Affordable Housing Task Force Recommendations Review, 3-month report back to council be received, and the council authorized the use of up to $75,000 from the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund to retain a consultant to assist the town in preparing an affordable housing master plan. And further, that council extend the mandate and approve the amended terms of reference for the Affordable Housing Task Force to assist in the transition the Affordable Housing Master Plan development process and defer the establishment of a governance body until the plan is complete and an appropriate structure is identified. And can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Berman and Councillor Hamlin. And so we've got that on the floor. And Councillor Hamlin, I had you next. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I wanted to add my thanks to staff for this very thorough and thoughtful review of the Affordable Housing Task Force report. It certainly was a very dense report with a lot of recommendations, and I can see that a lot of serious thought was given to them, and I'm very appreciative of that. I would like to say I think it is a terrific idea to bring back and the mandate of the Affordable Housing Task Force until such time as there's another entity that can take over. We had some very skilled people on the committee, and also they have gained a lot of experience during the time that the task force was operating. They had speakers come in from all different I was going to say walks of life, but maybe the point is different businesses, and they just have a lot of knowledge. I like the idea of an affordable housing master plan. If we can establish achievable and specific goals, targets, priorities, we are more likely to get where we're going. And I think a plan that would set those kind of things out, wonderful. So lastly, I just wanted to say that I also appreciate the recognition that what we need in our community is workforce housing, and the percentiles of income that were noted in our staff report are for people earning between, what did I write down here? 36,000 and 51,000 a year. And this is the group that makes our community sustainable. We know now that there is a shortage of personal support workers, OPP officers, every manner of person who's in this income group cannot find housing here. And we need rental housing here. The consultant we had, Barry Lyons' firm, said we need 900 rental units for that income group for our workforce right now. So I am glad to see that we have before us a report that would allow us to move forward on these priorities in a timely fashion, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Council, any other questions or comments on this report? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I've got two through you to our CAO and staff. And I asked these questions with a comment of thanks as to the report itself, the work that's been done to date, both by the task force to get us to this point, and then staff picking up the ball and taking it through to the end line. It is greatly appreciated. I'm just curious to know, and I apologize, CAO Skinner, I didn't have a chance to ask you in advance, but when you were putting this report and working with your team, when the province came out with their Affordable Housing Task Force report, did that report in any way influence, change direction, add to the conversation in terms of what we may be able to do locally here in Collingwood? So that would be number one.
CAO?
Through you, Your Worship. Great question. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I know you've been involved in this topic for some time, as have a few other folks on council. I'll provide my view of it. A lot of the things that were in the provincial report were related to, I think, two major thrusts. One is to increase the supply of housing of any type that's available in the community. And the other one was around accelerating decisions and making sure that those decisions can move forward as quickly as possible. And I think that with respect to making sure that we provide as much housing as possible, we didn't spend as much time thinking about that in the short term, because we are looking at maximizing. We looked at the number of units that were required under the official plan and the research that had been done by the Affordable Housing Task Force's consultant. And we felt that we could just meet that supply, and that it also coincided with the amount of water that at best case we would have available. So we thought increasing supply in the short term, the next, say, 3 to 4 years, was probably not an immediate strategy, but that we certainly would be looking at it under the master plan in the longer term. With respect to accelerating decisions, one of the recommendations that was made is that the affordable housing specialist, I'm not sure the new person, would help to provide something along the lines of white glove service or accelerated attention for those who are looking to build affordable housing or rental housing in the community. And that was one of the things that we wanted to make sure, is that if people do have proposals to move forward, that they would get the best advice that they could. And we've recognized affordable housing as one of the priorities in the proposed water allocation bylaw. I do know that Director Valentine and potentially others that were on our working group read those recommendations in some detail from the province. So I did, if it's okay with the chair, want to open up for their reflections as well. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO. Follow up, Deputy Mayor.
It's a follow-up in the sense that unless it can be answered tonight, I'd be interested in learning more. And that was, again, going specifically back to the province. I read with interest, and there was some criticism as it relates to some of the recommendations that may have changes or give latitude to move forward with projects, say, specifically within a heritage district. And of course, we're a community that actually has a heritage district. So maybe not looking for an answer tonight, but I would appreciate maybe an update at some point. It could be through this process of a consultant or staff member coming on board as it relates to how some of these policies that the provinces are looking at could impact our heritage district, both from a positive and from a negative. And then I guess I have one last question, and I'll just preface it with a comment, and that is that, and I'll preface it knowing full well that the faces I'm looking at on the screen, from a staff perspective, none of you are here. So therefore, I'm not putting the blame at your feet when I say this. But Mayor Saunderson, it was interesting that you mentioned the winter of '97 is when the late Kathy Canning and her team brought the Special Olympics to the area. 2 years later, Interwest arrives in 1999, and within very short order, they're at the doors of the municipality to the west of us and to the town of Collingwood. And I mean, they didn't hide around the bush or beat around the bush in terms of what it is that they were going to build and the challenges that it would bring, and you know, that we would face. And housing was one, and traffic was the other. So here we are, 23 years later, to them basically, you know, putting a document before our municipal leaders at the time and saying this is what is coming down the road, you know, that you'll have to deal with. And something I've really struggled with this. And I remember one of our leading developers, and this is going back to 2010, and I'm being mindful of the clock, said in an article in, I don't know, Scartman magazine, it was Larry Dunn. And he said, like, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like, you know, for heaven's sakes, can we not get out of our silos and build a transit system that connects these two communities, referring to Blue and Collingwood? And we finally we got around to that. But the part that I've really struggled with for a long time, both as an elected official and as a realtor, is that we live in a region that is created by 2 silos by 2 counties and 4 silos by 4 municipalities. And yet we're never going to solve this problem, or we're never going to be able to tackle this issue if we can't collectively break out of our geographical boundaries and take this head on. And I'm really hoping that perhaps the staff person that is hired, brought on, is given some latitude to really approach our neighbors to the southeast and west. And maybe even we go to them in advance and say, this is the direction that we're going. We can't solve it alone. Can you get on board? Because to have 4 municipalities continue to spend money, and I'm not suggesting this isn't a great plan and it's not good and it's not a good investment, it is. But I think it could be a greater investment if all of the players were collectively at the table tackling the issue. The reality is that the majority of persons who work at the resort, the largest employer in the area, don't live in that area. We've got to tackle it from a regional perspective. So I just leave that comment. I think that this is, as I said, the Affordable Housing Task Force did yeoman's work, and I know that there are a number of people who would love to continue. I think that this report is excellent, and I'm really inspired that finally, as a municipality, 23 years later, we're moving the ball slowly uphill. But if we could do it from a regional perspective, I think we'd have a greater opportunity of actually moving the ball up the hill a lot faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Council, any other questions or comments on this? Councillor McLeod.
Just a couple of fact-based questions, and that is from through you, Mayor Saunderson, to Treasurer Quinlan. How many dollars do we have in the land acquisition reserve fund at this point? And I know that we allocated several $1 million from the asset sales to that fund, but I suspect there may have been a few dollars in there prior to. I'm trying to buy you time, Monica, while you look. So I know that there's been work done in this department.
Treasurer Quinlan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, yeah. I just need one more quick second. I believe it's around 4 million, but I just want to be sure before I. Well, I suppose I already said it, but just give me one quick sec.
I could sing if you'd like, but no one would appreciate it.
I would appreciate it. Just give me, sorry. My fingers don't work as fast. Sorry, it's just above 5 million. And at this point, we haven't allocated any interest earned in the reserve fund. So it would be slightly higher than that by the end of the year. So
follow up, Councillor.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor Saunderson. So that's the land acquisition reserve fund. We also have a housing reserve fund. So while you're on that page, don't let your fingers get away from you, Treasurer Quinlan. Could you also provide us an update of how many dollars is in that particular fund, with the awareness that the suggestion is that the housing reserve fund pay for the housing specialist, or sorry, the consultant that is being suggested in this task force, in this report, sorry. Through you, Mayor Saunderson.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor McLeod. Yes, so 350,000 was allocated through the 2022 budget for the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. That is the very first time we've actually established that. So that's the amount for today.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Council, any other questions or comments? Just to comment briefly on the Deputy Mayor's comments, I think they're worthy comments. This is a very complex problem. We've heard our Premier talk about the need for multi cooperation amongst all levels of government, federal, provincial, and municipal. And in our municipality, we do work with our neighbors through the Mayors and CAOs Forum. And affordable housing has been raised as an issue. We certainly know that the town of Blue Mountain is putting a lot of effort into this, a lot of focus into this. I know and I'm hopeful that that level of cooperation will continue. We certainly see through the county. Simcoe County's had a 10-year affordable housing strategy. They are on target, but it's woefully inadequate, as we're seeing from the pressures that we see today. But I'm hopeful when you look at the money from the Canada Housing First Initiative, significant amounts of money are flowing down to the municipalities. They're not reaching municipalities of our size, but we can hope that that will change. And we can hope that working with the province, we can make our efforts on the ground here far more effective. And so we are beginning a long journey. And I think this report is an excellent start. So with that being said, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously, but I see Clerk almost has her hand up.
Sorry, Your Worship, I'm not sure that I received the mover and seconder for that motion.
We did put it on the floor. I can't recall who the mover and seconder were. Councillor Berman, were you one of them? And Councillor, who else? Who was the seconder? Sorry. Councillor Hamlin. Okay, so it's Councillor Berman and Councillor Hamlin.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, and that was carried unanimously, I think. And then that takes us on to motions, item 11.1, and the confirmation of completion of the land use planning policy study. So I'll read the notice of motion in. Whereas subsection 38 sub 1 of the Planning Act permits the passage of an interim control bylaw where a municipal council has directed that a review or study be undertaken in respect of land use planning policies in the municipality or in any defined area or areas thereof. And whereas the town of Collingwood passed interim control bylaw 2021-24 on April 26, 2021. And whereas the town of Collingwood commenced a land use planning policy study in June 2021 to provide recommendations to address a significant and ongoing water and wastewater capacity shortage in the town through the town's land use planning policies, regulations, or other tools. And whereas the findings of the land use planning policy study were presented to council through report P 2021-38 on December 20, 2021, which included 3 implementation recommendations. Be it hereby resolved that further to report P 2021-38, the council of the town of Collingwood confirms that for the purposes of section 38 of the Planning Act, the land use planning policy study is complete and the resulting recommendations are being implemented as outlined in resolution RES 398-2021. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Berman. Council, any questions or comments on that before I call the vote? This has been a very big issue for our council, and we've been receiving reports at the outset of every meeting. So I think we are up to date on this. That being said, I'm going to call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us to item 12, notices of motion. We have no notices of motion, but I'm aware, Councillor Dory, you will be dealing with your notice of motion under other business. Item 13 is Simcoe County report. I know that Councillor McLeod provided a report last meeting. Thank you for that. And so I don't know that we need have anything new to report. So that brings us then to item 14, the general consent agenda. The resolution reads that council herein receive general consent agenda, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are those of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. 14.1 proclamation, Wee Willie Winkle's Day, March 5th, 2022. The clock tower will be illuminated green from March 4th to 6th, 2022. 14.2 proclamation, International Women's Day, March 8th, 2022. There's a flag raising on March 4th, 2022 at 10 a.m. and the clock tower is to be illuminated purple from March 7th to 9th. And 14.3, John Edwards, Boulevard parking fee. So can I get a mover and a second to get the general consent agenda on the floor, and then I will ask for items to be pulled. Councillor Berman and Councillor Jeffrey, all in favor? That is approved unanimously. Thank you. Are there any items to be pulled tonight, Council? Seeing none, that brings us then to old or deferred business. And item 15.1.1 is the reaffirmation of Council Code of Conduct. And I will read that motion in, and it reads as follows. Whereas Council adopted a new Collingwood Code of Conduct for members of Council committees and local boards at its meeting held December 13, 2021. And whereas the Collingwood Community-Based Strategic Plan requires the annual reaffirm of the Council Code of Conduct by all members of Council, therefore be it resolved that Council herein reaffirm that we have read and continue to understand and adhere to the Council Code of Conduct. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Berman and Councillor McLeod. I'm going to look to Clerk Almus. Is there anything else that needs to be officially read in, or by voting on this, are we adopting the motion as worded? Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, by doing this is an annual requirement of our community-based strategic plan, even though Council recently approved the updates, so that is sufficient. I would suggest a recorded vote.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. So I will ask for a recorded vote, and then I will pass it back to you, Clerk Almus.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your yes cards. Thank you. Motion is carried unanimous.
Thank you. And that brings us then to item 15.1.2, which is the proposed zoning bylaw amendment servicing capacity allocation framework. And the motion reads as follows: that staff report P 2022-5 proposed zoning bylaw amendment servicing capacity allocation framework for the town of Collingwood be received, and further that council enacts and passes an amending zoning bylaw attached as Appendix A to prohibit the use of land or the erection or use of buildings or structures unless adequate municipal water and wastewater services are available to service the land, buildings, or structures, except where development is permitted on private individual on-site water and wastewater systems and or for minor construction activities. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Berman and Councillor Doherty. Council, any questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us then to other business. And Councillor Doherty, I will pass it over to you for your notice of motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it's safe to say that the entire world has been shocked and dismayed by the developments in Ukraine, and it's the threat to its sovereignty. And while our national leaders are able to pass sanctions against Russia, we as a municipality don't have that power, but we certainly do have that power to take a stand on principle. And so this motion is to take that stand and to recognize it by raising the flag of Ukraine and lighting our clock tower. And I will read the motion now. Whereas a growing number of Canadian municipalities have demonstrated support for Ukraine in its ongoing conflict with Russia by raising the flag of the Ukraine, and whereas the town of Collingwood, in all its guiding principles as driven by the community-based strategic plan and in all its actions, stands for freedom, self-determination, tolerance, and peace. And whereas the recent unprovoked invasion of an act of war against the sovereign country of Ukraine by Russia fundamentally conflicts with these guiding principles, therefore be it resolved that the town of Collingwood join other municipalities across Canada in declaring its support for the continued sovereignty of Ukraine and the safety and freedom of its peoples, and raise the flag of Ukraine and light the clock tower in the blue and yellow of its flag in a demonstration of this solidarity. And that the flag be raised at the earliest possible time, acknowledging current commitments. And I believe that that will come forward at SIC.
I'll look to Clerk Almus. Go ahead, Sarah.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. Now that the item was added to business of this agenda, a request to waive notice of motion can be presented and addressed this evening.
Councilor Doherty, if you'd like to put a motion on the floor to waive notice, your opportunity is now.
Yes, if that is the case, then I will waive notice. I do acknowledge that there are other time-sensitive commitments on the community flagpole, but certainly this motion purports to move forward as quickly as possible and when those commitments are fulfilled. So I will request notice to waive.
All right. Do you have a seconder? Councillor McLeod, okay, and so we don't have discussion, and I will call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. So you've read your notice of motion. I'll look for a seconder for that notice, Councillor McLeod. And is there anything further you wish to say at this point, Councillor Doherty?
No, I believe that the motion and my preamble kind of says it all.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, Council? Okay, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, maybe just a question of clarification. Sorry, was the intent to have the flag raised at the community flagpole out front of the library?
Yes.
So through you to staff, and I'll just leave it, is there an appropriate allocation to have the flag actually flown on one of the poles out front of the town hall?
I'll look to Clerk Almus.
Certainly, we do have a flag protocol in place, and those flags are not movable on the flags in front of the town hall. And we don't have a policy regarding changing the top flag on top of the clock tower pertaining primarily to health and safety issues.
Any follow-up, Deputy Mayor? Okay. Councillor Jeffrey.
So along that same vein, with permission of other participants, would it be possible, or is it proper protocol to fly the Ukraine flag at the same time as our other participants?
Clerk Almus.
Certainly. Sorry, if I could just clarify, the question pertains to the community flagpole and the other commitments. The town has the ability to remove flags that are being flown based on different circumstances that arise. So if council makes this a priority, we would work with the other groups. Primarily right now, we have the pink being displayed in the anti-bullying flag. We will have I believe the next opportunity that the flag is being used is for International Women's Day, which we do have a big public event. But between now and the International Women's Day, we can fly it during International Women's Day, the flag that has been prepared, and then immediately following that, reinstate the Ukrainian flag.
Mayor Saunders, if I might follow up with Clerk.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, my question was, could we fly two at the same time with permission of the other?
That's a good question. I would actually have to, I can ask the question of our Fleet and Facilities Division if two can be flown. And again, we have to run it by the organization that had requested originally, but we can investigate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamlin, I saw you. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Councillor Doherty for bringing the motion forward. It's I think we've seen around the world, governments are doing what they can, businesses are doing what they can, individuals are doing what they can, and this is what we can do at this time. And I'm just so fully in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, council? Seeing none, and I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Doherty. And unless there's any other business, I'm going to look to Clerk Almus. I saw your card, Councillor Jeffrey, and I'll come back to you. But we are going to be transitioning to in-person meetings tomorrow, with the beginning of March. So I'm just going to ask Clerk Almus if she can walk us through the protocols and the changes so that council is aware and our public is aware.
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. And as the COVID protocols are changing throughout the province and the various health units, we are keeping our eye on it, but we are looking forward to hosting our first hybrid council meeting next Monday evening. So we do at this point, pertaining to our participation and safety plan that council has approved, we'll have all of council in the council chambers. The CAO and myself will be present, and potentially other department heads, depending on the content of the agendas for the SIC and the corporate community services. Delegations will remain at this time to be remote and join us via our Zoom process. So again, if you request to be a deputation, please make sure that you fill out the appropriate form. And delegations, again, can participate as normal without a pre-registration. And as the restrictions and capacity limits change, we look forward to getting more people into the council chambers when that happens. We will also be working with the executive director, Peg, and her communications team to ensure communications are also provided later this week. We did have a meeting earlier today, so that will be communicated via our social media channel, our website, and however else we can ensure that the public is aware on how to engage with council on our decisions coming forward.
Thank you, Clerk Almus. Council, any questions or comments? Quick question, Clerk Almus. So for our municipal facilities, as the vaccine passport is no longer required after tomorrow or starting tomorrow, will we be sending out to the public or publicizing on the town website the requirements for accessing municipal buildings and the changes that are happening?
I think, Your Worship, that's probably a better question for Executive Director Peg.
Executive Director
or CAO.
If not, maybe I'll pass it to CAO Skinner, and if it's we can follow up later if necessary, but go ahead, please, Sonia.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I know that we've sent some notes out to our staff on how to manage these pieces, and I see Director Culver is also on the line. I think he may be able to talk to the plans for some of the facilities that the majority of people in town would be interacting with, like the arena and the pool. Director Culver?
Go ahead, Director Culver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, CEO. Yeah, so in accordance with the provincial guidelines, we'll be removing POV requirements at the recreation facilities. We still have capacity limits in place, but so, you know, in some cases, bookings are required, for example, at the pool. However, yeah, proof of vaccination will no longer be a requirement in accordance with the provincial regulations.
Okay, thank you. All right, unless there's any other questions or comments on that update, Councillor Jeffrey, you had some other business?
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Just a quick update with respect to the advocacy work I had before council this evening. It was through our FCM advocacy for budget 2022 with the federal government. And the meeting was specifically with the Honorable Goody Hutchings, who is the Minister of Rural Economic Development. And I think an opportunity for us, if we so wish to take it, is that Minister Hutchings is accepting invitations to come out to rural communities and to see firsthand the challenges, and she likes to call them the opportunities that we have, so that she can represent us better at the cabinet in terms of the existing policies and funding availability going forward. So if that is of interest to you, she's receiving them. Where we fit in on the queue, I have no idea. But her mandate letter is specific to housing, tourism, immigration, and our federal municipal relationship. And I think they're all things that hit directly with the challenges and opportunities that we have here in Collingwood. And so it was a great discussion. They were commenting on the National Housing Summit, the federal one that was held last week with Minister Hussein and Minister Hutchings, and many of the things that we talked about tonight under Affordable Housing Task Force report came up in discussion. And so they're looking for all the information they can get with respect to that file as well. So pass that over to you.
Thank you very much for that update, Councillor. Any questions or comments on that or any other business, Council? Seeing none, that brings us then to our confirmatory bylaw, and it reads as follows. The bylaw number 2022-10 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held February 28, 2022 be enacted and passed this 28th day of February 2022. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Madigan and Councillor Berman. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. And we've come to this meeting in very quick order. And now Councillor Jeffrey is anticipating my next question. Motion to adjourn. Thank you very much, Councillor Jeffrey. All in favor? And that is also carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. That was a productive meeting.